Hello and welcome. I'm Leanne Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Trump says, I think we may have a deal on Gaza as Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accuses world leaders of appeasing evil and demands Hamas frees all the hostages during a speech at the UN General Assembly. Ex-FBI Chief James Comey has been formally charged with 2 offences related to a testimony he gave to Congress.
We couldn't imagine ourselves living in.
A major poll predicts far-right leader Nigel Farage will be Britain's next Prime Minister. And the world's largest comedy festival kicks off in Riyadh with international stars Kevin Hart and also Dave Chappelle set to perform. Now, President Donald Trump has said, I think we may have a deal on Gaza. His comments come after Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made a high-stakes speech to the UN General Assembly in New York. He claimed most of the world does not remember October the 7th, accused world leaders of appeasing evil rather than supporting Israel, and delivered a direct address to hostages in Gaza. Take a listen.
Our brave heroes. This is Prime Minister Netanyahu speaking to you live from the United Nations. We have not forgotten you, not even for a second. The people of Israel are with you. We will not falter and we will not rest until we bring all of you home. We're not done yet. The final elements, the final remnants of Hamas are holed up in Gaza City. They vow to repeat the atrocities of October 7th again and again and again, no matter how diminished their forces. That is why Israel must finish the job. That is why we want to do so as fast as possible. You know what message the leaders who recognize the Palestinian state this week sent to the Palestinians? It's a very clear message. Murdering Jews pays off.
For more on this, I'm joined by Leanne Pollack-David, co-founder of the Israeli Coalition for Regional Security, who is in Tel Aviv. Leanne, a pleasure to have you on the show. Good evening. Dozens of delegates walked out ahead of Netanyahu's speech, in which he spoke directly to the hostages and said, we will not rest until we bring all of you home. Did he hit the right tone with his speech to the UN General Assembly?
Well, of course, these pictures are not pictures that Israelis like to see. We are currently facing some troubling isolation around the world, and this is partially justified due to the fact that Netanyahu's steer hasn't been aligned, not with the Western leaders and not with the Arab world, but also not with the Israeli public. So, of course, we are very unhappy to see these pictures here in Israel as the Israeli public is pushing for the end of the war, for a ceasefire, for a hostage deal, and of course is looking for a regional solution for the day after in Gaza. But I will say that Netanyahu did explain Israel's case very clearly. He also talked about peace opportunities, the extension of the Abraham Accords, the ongoing talks with Syria, the opportunity with Lebanon, and he did talk directly to the hostages in Gaza as, in my view, the way that I see it, as potentially a preparation for a ceasefire deal that may occur in the next few days, with regards to the push from President Trump. So I see this more as a preparation for Monday. Monday is that meeting of the Prime Minister Netanyahu with President Donald Trump. This is basically the main event. This is where decisions will be taking place. And I see this shout out to the hostages or putting the hostages return in the center front of his speech as potentially a preparation for such a potential deal. Obviously, the Israeli public is very much pushing for that to happen.
And during his speech, Netanyahu also addressed Israel's ongoing assault on Gaza City, as you just mentioned, saying they have not deliberately targeted civilians. But for a little bit of context, more than 65,000 Palestinians have been killed since October 2023. And you did mention there that Israel, when they look at those pictures of delegates leaving the UN General Assembly as Netanyahu about to speak, it's very isolating. Is the Prime Minister now trying to control the narrative and win back some public support?
Well, I believe the only thing that will win back public support is not really the words, but actually the actions. This war has had to, it had to end a few months ago, and the Israeli public is pushing for that. I hope that now Netanyahu understands that not only this is what the Israeli public is pushing for, but actually not only the regional community and the global community, but with President Trump's steer, but also assurances with regards to Israel's security in Gaza in the day after. This is critical, not just for Netanyahu himself, but for the Israeli public. We need to make sure that Hamas no longer controls Gaza, is completely disarmed, and we need answers on who's actually going to do it. We don't want to do it. None of the Israeli average soldier is, cheerful when they go to Gaza and have to deal with dismantling Hamas. We really want somebody else to do it. But the question is, who's actually going to do this dirty work? And how do we make sure that with the humanitarian aid and with the funding that is required to rehabilitate Gaza, that is not going to rehabilitate Hamas? So all of those assurances, hopefully President Trump got them in his meeting with the Arab and Muslim heads of states a few days ago. And hopefully those will be enough for Israel and for Prime Minister Netanyahu for us to get to a ceasefire deal, which is exactly what we need yesterday for all sides involved.
But Leanne, ultra-nationalists in Netanyahu's governing coalition have repeated calls for Israel to annex the West Bank, calls for war to continue. If Netanyahu ignores Trump's wishes, as we did discuss, Donald Trump is saying a deal is close. Does this possibly put Netanyahu in a difficult position? Because we know right now he's trying to appease the right of his coalition. And if he then agrees to what Donald Trump is going to say, is he going to lose that support and that tight grip on power we've seen him have and possibly force an election to be held in Israel?
So what you may have noticed that in his speech, there was no talk at all about annexing the West Bank. And that's not just symbolic. It is indeed a reaction to what President Trump made very, very clear. And I think that politically, it is more convenient for Netanyahu to be the one that is being stopped, quote unquote, by President Trump, because it kind of gives an explanation even to his far right-wing partners on why he cannot do it. In effect, it may cause a political ripple effect. It may get him to election, but potentially with some wins in his hand. So if he gets to a hostage release deal, if he is able to get to an agreement with President Trump and the moderate Arab countries on a day after plan in Gaza that brings significant assurances for Israel's security, and maybe is even able to get to an agreement with President Ashara about Syria, and potentially open up new opportunities for the extension of the Abraham Accords, this will help him slide into the elections in a much better place than he is right now. And I think that he understands that.
Leanne Pollock-David, it's been great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your insights. For more on this, I'm joined by former US congressional staffer, geopolitical analyst, and the author of The Shadow War, Iran's Quest for Supremacy, Brandon Weichart. Thank you so much for joining me, Brandon. So first of all, Netanyahu started his fiery speech outlining Israel's achievements against Iran and its proxies across the Middle East. What did you make of his speech? Or was it just straight out of his propaganda playbook?
Well, I think that it's important to note that the Israelis have enjoyed, because of their alliance with the United States, the military alliance, they have enjoyed a high degree of success in terms of rolling back what they view as malign Iranian influence. At the same time, though, it remains to be seen if the Israelis will, quote, win the war. And they haven't even really described a war-winning strategy. Right now, since 10/7, it looks a lot like the Israelis have been playing a really wild game of whack-a-mole against their regional foes with our help. But thus far, there's been no war termination strategy outlined, which starts to get me a little worried. Is this going to be an open-ended war against everyone until the end of Netanyahu's time in office? And I think that's what a lot of people in the world are asking right now is, what does the end game look like for Israel? I don't know what that looks like right now, because it looks like Netanyahu wants to keep pressing until he can't press anymore.
And my guest I was just speaking to before you, Leanne, was saying that was the one thing. What's the plan for the day after? And this is the question that I've asked so many people who've come on my show and spoken to me from the Israeli side, also from the US side, and there doesn't really seem to be a plan in place for the day after. But Donald Trump does have some very positive signals that we're hearing last night when he was speaking to Erdogan in the White House, and today he's repeated, I think we're close on a deal to end the war. So do you think the meeting with Netanyahu is going to kind of reveal this day after plan?
Well, I think it will reveal what the Americans envision and what maybe the Turks envision, and by extension, the rest of the Islamic community in the Middle East envision for a war termination. I don't know if Netanyahu will go along with it. At the same time, I think it's very important to remember, yes, Trump and Netanyahu have a very simpatico relationship right now, but they didn't always have that. And it's very transactional, it seems, to me at least, the relationship between Trump and Netanyahu. And Trump might be positioning himself to be able to say, kind of like what he did with Ukraine and Europe, to say to the region, it's your mess, you take the lead, you clean it up, we're just going to step back now. And I think that might force Netanyahu to become a little bit more compliant, because again, right now, it doesn't make sense what Israel is trying to do in terms of the war-winning side. They can fight, no doubt, but what does the end look like? And your previous guest was talking about Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization. There's no doubt about that. But also Hamas enjoys a lot of support in Gaza right now still. And so how is Israel going to rectify that? Because if their goal is to invade, re-invade, and occupy indefinitely Gaza, that's going to be in the long term harmful to Israel, even more so than what they've already done has been.
And I think these are all the big questions that people want the answers to. And his 40-minute speech actually today included a variety of visual elements, and there was even a pop quiz. But dozens of diplomats walked out. We saw those pictures. Yeah. And do you think that Netanyahu realizes right now just how isolated he is on the global stage, and that really the only person supporting him is the US? And if he loses that support, how is he going to keep on funding this war machine? Because it's mainly American money.
That's right. American money and weapons. Absolutely. I think Netanyahu does. He's a very smart guy. He's a very savvy operator. This is why he's stayed in power for as long as he's been. He understands this. But in his worldview, you have to remember, in his Likudnik worldview, Israel has always been isolated. Israel has always been, it's them versus the world. And some of that is because of the experience in the Holocaust and all of that. But ultimately, this has always been something Netanyahu has believed. So I don't know if personally Netanyahu much cares whether he and his country are isolated as long as they're seen as winning the tactical and strategic military side. But then you throw in the added problem for him of how far will America go along with him? And I think that's a big question now, because it does seem like Trump is starting to create boundaries. He said, don't you dare do West Bank. He's looping Erdogan in, and he's basically sort of, it seems, trying to kind of put as many players on the board with Trump to kind of force Netanyahu into a more compliant stance. So it's really a question now of, does Netanyahu think he has enough to keep going? And he might have to reassess, because up until now he has. But if Trump is starting to bring Erdogan and some of these other players into the mix, they're not going to want to see Israel keep doing what they're doing. And Trump might be sending a strong signal to Netanyahu, stand down, or we will start pulling back like we're doing with NATO in the Ukraine war, handing it over to the Europeans and saying, tag, you're it.
And you know what? I actually find it quite interesting, because many analysts have been saying the same thing. They seem President Trump is finally putting on some pressure on Israel because the international community is demanding this right now. But just before we get to that topic, I wanted to ask you a little bit about Hamas. And we always hear from Israel about the eradication of Hamas. And we obviously seen this occupation of Gaza City, 65,000 people dead within Palestine over this war time. My big question is, Hamas is also an ideology.
Yes.
Yes. Is there any way of eradicating something like that completely?
No, and actually it's very interesting. So you remember right after 10/7, IDF went in and they did do a significant amount of damage in terms of killing large numbers of Hamas. But Hamas was able to replenish very rapidly those lost people. Now, whether those lost people are as good of fighters as the people who were killed before them is another matter. But Hamas has been able, and Mossad even says this behind the scenes. I talked to many Israelis. They will tell you behind the scenes that, Hamas has reconstituted itself. It's like constantly regenerating, which is why they're talking about now occupying Gaza. But they don't seem to be making the connection in Israel that you're not going to be able to annihilate Hamas the way that they think, because Hamas is an ideology. And every time you squeeze that region in Gaza, it creates more recruits. It creates more people, more animosity, blaming the Israelis for their problems. And so the best solution, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, is Israel should, if they're this worried about the security threat, build a big, beautiful wall separating them from Gaza and tell the people of Gaza, good luck and God bless. It's on you to figure out how you're going to fix the problem. But instead, they seem to want to be enmeshed in that region, and that's going to keep regenerating Hamas without much of any problem for Hamas. They will have no problem finding recruits.
Brandon, I wonder where you got the big, beautiful wall idea, but I've only got 1 minute left with you, and I just want a really quick answer. So we know Netanyahu is meeting Donald Trump on Monday. Donald Trump signaling we're close to an end to the war. Do you think Monday we'll actually see a ceasefire in place? We'll see movement?
We might see some movement, but the war will never end. And this is the problem. You have two radical groups. You've got Netanyahu's group and you've got Hamas. Neither of them ultimately want the war to end. They want to keep killing each other. And that's going to be the problem for everybody caught in the middle.
Brandon, it was a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for your thoughts. Now, former FBI Chief James Comey has been formally charged with 2 offences related to a testimony he gave to Congress. He's accused of lying to a Senate committee in 2020 about whether he authorised a leak of classified information to the media. Comey has said he is innocent. For more on this, I'm joined from Washington by our correspondent, Sarah Firth. This is an extraordinary moment. The former FBI director facing federal charges. Really, how significant, Sarah, is this indictment and the fact that we're talking about it?
Yeah, it's an absolutely huge moment. It'll go down in American history. You've got the former FBI director indicted on federal charges. The first senior government official to be facing prosecution in this way over Trump's main grievance. That's the 2016 Russia investigation, and James Comey was right at the heart of that, leading that inquiry. Leanne, Comey is charged with giving a false statement and obstruction of a congressional proceeding relating to the testimony that he gave to the Senate Judiciary Committee some 5 years ago. Now, the indictment comes just days after President Trump called for this very, very publicly. You had, as this news broke yesterday evening, the president taking to Truth Social, celebrating the news in all caps on his Truth Social post, calling this justice. Now, Comey, for his part, he's remained very defiant. He says his heart is broken for the Justice Department, that he is innocent. So he says, let's go to trial.
And you know what, Sarah, for viewers who might not have followed every twist of this saga, remind us, why is James Comey such a central figure in the long-running feud between Donald Trump and the FBI?
Yeah, James Comey, Leanne, really personifies all of President Trump's main grievances with the FBI. So if you cast your minds back to 2016, you had this extremely critical presidential election. There was an investigation headed by James Comey and the FBI into alleged Russian interference in the presidential election and whether President Trump's campaign colluded on that. Now, for President Trump, for his supporters here in the US, that inquiry in and of itself was seen as a major betrayal. President Trump has often framed this as a deep state plot against him. However, for critics of this indictment that has been brought against James Comey, they are saying that this is not justice, that this is revenge. This is President Trump going after his political opponents. And what's really explosive about this case, Leanne, is not just the indictment on those federal charges itself, but the way that this came about. Now, the US attorney in Virginia who had pushed back against bringing these charges, he resigned. Then you had brought in Lindsay Halligan. She was installed. Now, she is a former Trump lawyer. She is not someone who has prosecutorial experience. And what you've got here in the US right now is career prosecutors saying, there are issues with some of these charges. The evidence seems weak. Indeed, one of the charges that went before the grand jury was dropped. So even before we've heard any evidence, there's a lot of political theatre around this. Interestingly, President Trump was questioned a little earlier on today as he left the White House. The reporter saying to him, who else is on the list? Who's next on the list for retribution? President said, well, there is no list, but there will be others. He's making it very clear. He does think that it is worth going after other people potentially involved in this issue that has caused him such grievance. He pushed back at the reporter saying that it is justice, it's not revenge. But Leanne, many critics, as I said, here in the US, seeing this as exactly that, an act of revenge against Trump's political opponents. And James Comey is just the first of what it seems, according to the president, might be many more.
Yes, Sarah, thank you so much. And as we know, Lindsay Halligan, she was just elected to the role literally within this week. So pretty fast turnaround. Sarah Firth, thank you so much. Now, a major new poll has predicted that far-right leader Nigel Farage is on track to become Britain's next Prime Minister. The seat-by-seat YouGov poll suggests his party, Reform UK, has extended its lead over Labour, significantly increasing Farage's chances of entering Downing Street in 2029. Earlier today, the current Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, admitted Labour faces a battle with Reform UK, and for the soul of the country, that's at a crossroads. For more on this, I'm joined by Reform Party member and former Conservative MP, Sir Jake Berry. Jake, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. So, let's talk about this new YouGov poll that predicts Nigel Farage is on course to be the next Prime Minister, and Reform has said a political earthquake is coming. Undoubtedly, you and the party delighted. But what has caused the sea change that we are seeing in the UK?
Well, first of all, let me pick up on your introduction. There is no world in which Nigel Farage should ever be described as a far-right leader or a far-right politician. I think that's deeply offensive. It's actually not just offensive to Nigel Farage, but as this poll shows, it's deeply offensive and incorrect to the majority of the population here in Britain. And I'd take the opportunity to ask you to withdraw those remarks.
I would like to say that I do apologise for those remarks that were put in the intro when we did refer to Nigel Farage as far-right. Jake, I do apologise. Sorry for those comments.
So in relation to these opinion polls, it is the latest of a series of opinion polls that have shown how the British people are uniting behind an alternative vision for Britain, one that puts British interests at its heart and ensures that, we prioritise what the British people want in a way that we haven't seen from other political parties. And that's why I think Reform is consistently leading British opinion.
And the next general election is actually expected in 2019, unless the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, calls an early election. Jake, do you think it's dangerous to start obsessing about the next election when we've only just had one? We've seen it in the past. It's so easy to make promises when you aren't actually in power.
Well, look, there's a long way to go to the next election. What I'd say to my colleagues in the Reform Party is opinion polls and leads go up and down. But there clearly has been a sea change here in British politics. And it appears to me that there are now two political movements in the UK. There is Reform, led by Nigel Farage, campaigning for real change here in Britain, driven by the people's priorities. And then there is all the other political parties, if you like, the political establishment, who are united by one thing, and that is their desire to attack Reform. It isn't working. The British public have seen through it. And while there may be a long way to go, 4 or 5 years until the next general election, I do believe that the Reform Party has caught the views, the opinions, the zeitgeist of the British people, however you may put it, and is well placed to maybe have the privilege of forming the next government.
And Darren Jones, Keir Starmer's right-hand man, told a summit in London today, "I don't understand why Reform hates Britain so much. They hate the BBC, they hate the NHS." Are we seeing the political divide between the right and the left becoming more polarised in the UK like we are seeing in America at the moment? Or do you think that's not quite it?
No, I think it is clear that Britain is becoming a more left-right society. Those political parties who believe they've traditionally occupied the middle ground seem to be falling back. If you look at the sort of data behind this opinion poll, whatever Darren Jones may say, it is absolutely clear that the British people, the majority of the people, or the lead of the people polled by this survey, think that Nigel Farage and the Reform Party better know, understand and represent Britain and all of her people than Labour ever can. And one of the things we've seen this summer is this campaign called Hoist the Colours, which is about people celebrating British national culture, taking pride in their flag, taking pride in their country. And I do think that that has demonstrated how people are ready to back reform and want to really speak up and be proud of Britain in a way that even Keir Starmer said in his speech to a group of left-wing leaders today in London, the left has traditionally run away from.
And I think it's really interesting that Keir Starmer did address reform directly today in that speech in London. Does it really show that Labour are now completely aware that reform is leading the political agenda in the UK and they've got a lot of catching up to do?
Well, it goes back to my earlier comment about, there appearing to be two political movements, the establishment and reform that stands for change. And Labour has attacked reform, the Liberals have attacked reform, the Conservative Party is attacking reform. There is a status quo in this country, a status quo that people in Britain are not happy with, a feeling of decline in our country. There is an alternative. That alternative is reform, and it's not represented by Labour or any of the traditional mainstream parties, which is why I chose to leave one of those mainstream parties and join this new political movement. And I would just add, Reform today have signed up as of today, have over 250,000 members. That makes it the second largest political party in the United Kingdom in terms of membership, just behind the Labour Party. Soon, I believe it will be the biggest political party in the United Kingdom. And that reflects the grassroots groundswell of support we've seen behind Nigel Farage's alternative vision for Britain.
And I actually have seen that email, and it did say we have now 250,000 paid-up members of Reform UK. This is a huge moment for our party. Only 15 months ago, we had 30,000 members, and that was what Nigel Farage wrote to his members today. But I just want to touch on the Prime Minister's plans to introduce digital ID cards. Is it not time to bring the UK out of the analogue world and into the digital age?
Well, I oppose the Prime Minister's plan to bring in digital ID cards. This is supposedly to tackle illegal migration here in the UK. I mean, the first thing I would say is, why should people in Britain change the way they live their lives because the government can't control its borders? It's much better for the government just to try and control the borders. We have a long tradition here in the United Kingdom of the government or government or any arms of the state not being able to demand ID from you. This seems to me to be a step down the road of reversing that tradition. What other countries do around the world is a matter for them, but in my view, this is deeply un-British if we go down this route.
Sir Jake Berry, I wanted to apologise for the intro there and just once again, thank you for your time. Now, rescuers in Taiwan are racing to find at least 11 people who are still missing after Super Typhoon Ragasa ripped through the region. At least 14 people have been confirmed dead after the storm, and the devastation is still hindering efforts to find survivors, as Patrick Fock does report.
Emotions are running high among family and friends of those still missing following the storm. Rescue efforts are ongoing, but the weight is too much to bear for this woman named Yuan. My friends are buried inside over there, she says. How will we find them? Their bodies have been washed over in the floods. Much of Guangfu town and Hualien County has been blanketed in thick mud. Heavy rains caused what's called a barrier lake in the mountains to overflow and release a thick sludge of water and mud over the region. Rescuers wading in the deluge up to their waists have been cutting holes in the roofs of houses to find people. For some, it's already too late. This man says his elder sister was trapped in her home and died. He just hopes he can retrieve her body.
So she was inside her home when the floods happened. Her son-in-law took a risk, and when the flood receded, my sister didn't try to leave until the water reached her waist. So she died in the house because it was completely filled with mud and there was no way to get her out.
Satellite images show how a body of water formed along an ever-growing channel near Guangfu Township, turning into a barrier lake. They occur when rocks, landslides or other blockages make a dam across a river, hindering natural drainage. Taiwan is typically well honed for typhoon evacuations, but the death toll and missing people have prompted questions about precautions and systems to ensure safety. Patrick Falk, Al Arabiya English.
Now, the world's largest comedy festival kicks off in Riyadh today. Over 50 international stars from across the globe will perform at the iconic Boulevard City during the event. Kevin Hart, Dave Chappelle, Bill Burr and Jimmy Carr are just some of the names who will be in action there. And for more on this, I'm joined by cultural commentator Harith Al-Bastani. Thank you so much for joining us, Harith. So let's just talk, as I mentioned there, this is a massive event and it's all in the name of celebration and comedy. Can you tell us about what we can expect?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, like you said, you listed off just a couple of the names participating. What to expect is really a comedy festival on an unprecedented scale. And we're talking about, like you say, more than 50 of the world's most famous and celebrated stand-up comedians. They're all going to be performing in Riyadh over the next 2 weeks. And we're talking about the likes of Dave Chappelle, Chris Tucker, Jimmy Carr, Zana Garg, you name it. It's really, like I say, it's on a completely unprecedented scale.
Yeah, definitely. I must admit, Dave Chappelle is by far one of my comedians. He's old school, but he's always really good. And it's not just international stars who have never visited the region, but there's going to also be some more familiar faces performing in Riyadh.
Exactly. I mean, this is one of the things that's really interesting, is that you have some of these international stars who have never been before, but you also have stars like, I believe Kevin Hart's performed in Riyadh before, and Russell Peters has performed in Saudi Arabia, I think 3 times.
Wow.
But at the same time, you have other comedians who have performed in the region. So, for example, as part of earlier this year, I think Bill Burr, Kevin Hart, Dave Chappelle performed in the Abu Dhabi comedy season. And so it's really interesting to see that you actually have comedians who are coming to the region, performing, and actually coming back repeatedly. And I think it's a real testament to the experience of the region and what we see all across the comedy sector here.
And probably the crowds too. I'm sure they attract a lot, do they?
Exactly, yeah, certainly, yeah. This is the thing. These are all comedians who are used to selling out world tours, and they're coming here and they're filling out stadiums. There was a time when I was younger, I'm Emirati, and comedy shows were kind of here and there, and they weren't necessarily always in the biggest venues. But now, as we see in Riyadh Comedy Festival, they're in theatres, they're in these massive theatres, and they're all selling out, so it's really interesting to see.
Yeah, it is interesting to see, but what does it also mean for the region? You know, we spoke about it a little bit there, but to just attract such big talent, how positive is it for the region as a whole?
Well, it's great, honestly. I mean, like with Saudi Arabia, for example, this is something we've seen across a couple of different sectors for a while now. We've seen it with sports, attracting talent like Cristiano Ronaldo. We've seen it all across the entertainment sector as well. And I think one of the things that people are really attracted to is, look, they're seeing Saudi Arabia, they're seeing all these incredible mega projects, all these exciting things that are happening. They're seeing the energy of Vision 2030. And I hear this a lot from people in the cultural sector. They say, look, Saudi Arabia has this really young population, really young demographic. They're really embracing all these opportunities that are opening up. And why wouldn't I want to be part of that? So you have these incredible world-class talents coming to the region with this really positive mentality. And in terms of what it means for the wider comedy scene, it's great because you have comedians who are traveling repeatedly to the region. And for example, just during the Riyadh Comedy Festival, simultaneously you have the Dubai Comedy Festival running. And you have some comedians like Tom Segura, Andrew Schultz, who are going to be performing at both. And so what I think it looks like we're seeing is potentially almost like a touring market opening up here. Touring market, sorry. And with that, hopefully you'll be seeing more and more of these world-class talents coming on a more frequent basis.
No, yeah, definitely. I wanted to get tickets for Andrew Schultz, but I didn't manage to. And let's talk a little bit about Saudi Arabia. You mentioned there that it's attracting a lot of talent and we've got these big projects going on. And of course, the World Cup will be going there. You know, it's growing its entertainment infrastructure right now. Where's that going and what are the plans for the future when it comes to entertainment and Saudi? We know Riyadh season when it comes to the boxing. All my friends get really excited about that too.
That's exactly it. I think, well, this is it. We're kind of, in a sense, looking at the future of it, because Saudi comedy, I mean, comedy has been popular in Saudi Arabia for a long time. There have been comedy clubs like in Jeddah and Riyadh for a while. And it's not the first comedy event that they've ever had, but there's never been anything anywhere near this scale before. And really, I think it's a testament to all of the investments that they've been making in the entertainment sector, like we say, aligned with part of the Vision 2030 objectives of creating new opportunities, enriching people's lives, diversifying the economy. Well, for a long time now, we've been seeing Saudi Arabia invest in the entertainment sector as a whole. So we've seen it in the music sector with events like Middle Beast, Soundstorm, attracting some of the biggest musicians in the world and huge crowds. We've seen it with esports, with the Esports World Cup, again, attracting the biggest names in esports. We've seen it, as you mentioned, with boxing. Mm-hmm. Just recently, the Canelo and Crawford fight was massive.
I woke up for that.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah, this is one of the, okay, nice.
Yeah, it was very good. But it's amazing, isn't it, that now the region is attracting, like you said, so much US talent, and it'll be really interesting to see where it goes. Have you ever done a stand-up comedy show
Not myself.
yourself?
No. I'm a man of many talents, but comedy is not one of them.
Yeah, I'm a woman of many talents, but not comedy. And thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you on. Once again, thank you for being in the studio with me. A reminder of our top stories. Trump says, I think we may have a deal on Gaza as Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accuses world leaders of appeasing evil and demands Hamas freeze all the hostages during a speech at the UN General Assembly. Ex-FBI Chief James Comey has been formally charged with 2 offences related to the testimony he gave to Congress. And a major poll predicts Reform UK leader Nigel Farage will be Britain's next Prime Minister. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and, of course, follow us on X. The Real Deal is coming up next with Tom Burgess-Watson. Goodbye and thank you.